few days ago on the Vancouver Canucks YouTube channel and Facebook page, they had a nice long 20-minute Zoom interview with Chris Tanev. Chris Tanev is one of the Vancouver Canucks defensemen who will be suiting up for the team come the 2020 play-in series against the Minnesota Wild, and he had some really nice comments to talk about. And it honestly goes past just the run-of-the-mill, what's it like coming back, playing against empty stadiums and all that stuff. There's quite a lot of juicy stuff in here that I think is going to be really, really interesting to talk about. So let's go over Chris Tanev's Zoom interview. What I did was I listened to it and I got some notes as to things I thought would be interesting to highlight in a video. Also, I'll leave a link in the description down to the YouTube version of the Zoom call. If you want to go to the Facebook version, the quality is a little bit better, but I like the YouTube version a little bit more because you can double the speed. That's what I do for every YouTube video I watch, and I'm sure it's what the majority of viewers on this channel also do with my videos because, hey, I talk pretty slowly, what can I do? It's actually really funny because the interview starts off with a question bringing up Chris Tanev's prosperity this past season. Now, the interviewer asks Chris, hey, you know, this past season was your best season ever. You played all the games, which has never happened before. You've never played 100% of the games in a season, and it happened here. Also, you matched your career high in points, and you did it in fewer games as well. So this was quite literally the best statistical season Chris Tanev has ever had at 30 years old, and that's awesome. But Chris Tanev takes that and he was like, yeah, you know, I kind of tweaked my knee in the last game. I probably would have sat out 5 or 6 games if the NHL season continued. So there's the killjoy right there. Why couldn't we just have had good things, hockey gods? Why would you have to curse Chris Tanev with an injury at the very last game of the season? But hey, okay, at least we're a few months away removed from that, and Chris Tanev is healthy now. That obviously is not really that important. I just thought it would be funny to throw that into the video. But the interview then goes over the contract situation with Tanev, and it highlights the economic climate as to what the NHL is going to be like for the next few years. We made a video about this a few days ago back when the rumors started to come out. Those rumors have then since been confirmed. The NHL salary cap is not going up, it's going to be a flat cap, and this could be the worst thing for the Vancouver Canucks in the short-term future. Chris Tanev says he acknowledges that. He says that, you know, the flat cap, it does mean that some changes will need to be done in discussions with contracts in comparison to how they would have been done if it wasn't a flat cap. He acknowledges that. He thinks he is good enough to get a contract and eventually continue his NHL playing career. He does say later on in the interview that he does want that to be with Vancouver. And he does highlight a few reasons as to why he would want that to be. However, after getting into a little talk about players getting onto the ice, Chris Tanev is asked about Jake Virtanen. Now, if you've been on Twitter, or I guess Instagram too, you would understand why Jake Virtanen was kind of getting flack over the past few days. A few days ago, he was, let's just say, going out. He was at Celebs, that's the nightclub on Davie Street. It intersects with Burrard, it's in downtown Vancouver, it is a prime-time Vancouver nightclub. And Jake Virtanen was there, seemingly without a mask. He was seen on Instagram stories that were then recorded, published onto social media, and eventually, you know, kind of discussed amongst the Vancouver Canucks fan base. People were talking about Jake Virtanen not going with a mask, him going in an environment that could potentially be dangerous for catching, you know, what you don't want to catch in these times, and it was just deemed as somewhat of an irresponsible act for a guy to be out there in the club, especially posting it on social media where everybody can go see. There was a really big controversy on Twitter calling out Jake Virtanen for doing something like this in a time where NHL athletes are supposed to be, you know, keeping themselves safe in anticipation for the NHL's return to play, and Jake Virtanen got the big end of that controversy. So they asked Chris Tanev on the Zoom call what he thought, and he said this: I think Jake knows he made a little bit of a mistake, but he's tested now, I believe twice, and he has tested negative. So it's obviously a tough situation when you're not technically in quarantine and you're allowed to go out and do what you want. But I mean, you gotta keep everyone in mind that we're trying to keep a safe environment for everyone. And that's true. A lot of the Canucks that were coming back to Vancouver from places like America, places like Europe, these guys have to do the 2-week quarantine. It's mandatory. They're coming in from other places. It's just what they have to do. Jake Virtanen is not flying in from anywhere, he's just driving over from Abbey. Because he's from Abbotsford, we all know that. So he's technically past the quarantine stage, he doesn't really need to do that anymore. Same thing with Chris Tanev and Alex Edler, these two are two of the only guys who actually stayed in Vancouver, because even though they do have residencies elsewhere outside the country, outside the province, they just decided to stay here. Troy Stecher's the other guy, but he's from Richmond, so it doesn't really count either. But Tanev himself said in the interview that it was a good decision for him and his fiancée to actually stay in Vancouver, because now, after all the protocols and all the work that Dr. Bonnie Henry has done for this province, they can go out to public parks, they can go to malls, they can do everything they can, just in a limited capacity. Meanwhile, in Ontario, you already know my thoughts on Ontario, they had that rule where if you're asymptomatic and you're positive, you can still go to work. Like, are you kidding me? In BC, that kind of thing would not fly. So, just seeing the containment that BC had with its protocol, it's really nice to see, but at the end of the day, still, hockey players, they still got to do their own work to keep themselves as safe as possible in that regard. For Jake Virtanen, obviously, you could debate that, hey, you know, it is safe to some capacity. Even if you go to the celebrities' Instagram page, you can see the rules they have. It's pretty locked down. Some people were talking on Twitter like, why is that even entertaining? Like, if those are the restrictions in place, why not just drink at home? But that's besides the point. Tanev does address this, and he talks about it on the interview. He also talks about Quinn Hughes. They ask him about the Calder race, of course, because, you know, you gotta ask everybody who's on the Canucks about the Calder race. And this is what Chris Tanev has to say: I would love to stay here in Vancouver and play with Quinn as long as I'm able to. I think we played great together when we did this year, and I think we both enjoyed it. And as far as his Calder run, yeah, I mean, I personally think he deserves it. I think he's an extremely dynamic player that is only going to get better and better for this organization, and it was pretty special what he did this year. And, you know, I'm not going to disagree. Finally, though, and this doesn't actually come from my own notes, I'm taking this from the Reddit post that talks about the Chris Tanev Zoom interview. He talks about Micheal Ferland. From Chris Tanev on the Facebook interview, Ferland actually drove from Winnipeg to Vancouver to avoid the quarantine requirements. And honestly, taking a look at that from the outside, hey, you know, that's pretty smart. According to this comment here on Reddit, the team requirement was that people who were flying in from other provinces needed to quarantine for 7 days. Ferland, while coming from another province, didn't fly in, he just drove, so he doesn't technically need to do that. It's why he was able to practice on the ice alongside of Edler, alongside of Tanev, alongside of Virtanen, and all the other guys who were actually here already in Vancouver, instead of quarantining like Petey and Miller and Brock and Quinn are. We've also got a ton of external updates on Micheal Ferland over the past few weeks, talking about things like, hey, he's working out, he's experiencing zero symptoms, he's playing with the Canucks on the ice, he's practicing, he's doing his thing. This is a guy who, if we could really actually see him be 100% healthy, we may be getting that top 6, top 9 player back that the Canucks weren't really able to use at all this past season against the Minnesota Wild. Now, I know we have Antoine Roussel and we have other guys who can play that somewhat agitative style game, but adding Micheal Ferland, oh boy, if there's one thing that Micheal Ferland has taught me about playoff hockey is that in this environment, he can come alive. Trust me, I hated this guy's guts in 2015 when he terrorized the Vancouver Canucks, and now we could potentially see that on our side of the pond here against the Minnesota Wild. That could be absolutely crazy, and if it takes a year's worth of a wait, then I'm all for it. Literally a year's worth of a wait. He was signed in the offseason last year. It's July now. We're not going to see hockey until August 1st. Or at least I think that's when it's going to happen. Yeah, something like that. Over a year's worth of wait to see Micheal Ferland do his thing the way we know Micheal Ferland can. And I'm very excited for that for sure. So again, take a look at the Chris Tanev interview. It'll be in the description below if you want to see that. Talk to me in the comments what you think about the stuff we talked about here today. What do you think about Jake Virtanen going to the club, Quinn Hughes and his Calder race, Tanev and the contracts, and Micheal Ferland eventually coming back? Talk to me in the comment section below. I'd love to hear that. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.